Hey, what's up? It's Andy Blanks again with another teacher prep video from our Amplify Bible study curriculum. This teacher prep video is for lesson 29 of Amplify. This is the first lesson in a 3-lesson look at holiness. In this lesson, we're going to really do some cool things. We're going to establish for your students why God alone is holy, what holiness is, and begin to really kind of unpack how that impacts their lives. Holiness is one of those words I feel like our students hear. They kind of know what the word holy is. They know it applies to God, but most of them have a very limited understanding of what it is. They tend to think that holy just means perfect, and it does. Absolutely, that is a connotation of it. And we know God is perfect in all of his ways and his attributes. But there's a little bit deeper nuance, a deeper connotation of what it means to be holy. And we're going to begin to look at that in this lesson and unpack it over the next 3 lessons. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to start with the Old Testament, as we often do in the first lesson of the series that we go through and Amplify. We're trying to build a case using the Old Testament, especially looking at how a certain characteristic, in this case holiness, kind of flows out of the character of God. So what we see out of the gate is that God himself identifies as holy. When God is talking to his people in Exodus, he basically says, "I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. Be holy as I am holy." Wow, that's big, right? God identifies himself as holy, but then there's this call for us to be holy as well. We know that call is echoed by Christ, and that call is picked up again in Peter. So again, we kind of that's really tight. That's actually a really important Bible study tool, a hermeneutic, if you will, to trace a concept through Old Testament to the Gospels and New Testament epistles. That's how we know that that's a solid concept that's relevant for our lives today. God says he's holy, and he says, "Be holy as I'm holy." Again, there is the expectation of perfection, of holiness. We tend to minimize Jesus' standard, the standard of God. When Jesus says, "Be holy as I'm holy," we're like, oh, that means complete. Well, no, I mean, really, Jesus wants and desires for us, and God desires for us to be sinless. That's his desire for us. Now, we know that the reality is, because of our sin nature, we aren't going to be sinless, right? But there is a desire for God and for Jesus to live righteous lives for us, to live righteous lives, to be holy. There's also a little bit different connotation there when God talks about being holy and then wants us to be holy. He's really talking about being set apart there. Being set apart, you may have heard the word consecrated before. God is other. God is set apart. God is not like anything else, and God wants us, his people, to be set apart from the world around us and the culture around us. So that's one aspect of it. But then we want to continue to build this idea of how we understand God's holiness and really think about the idea of God as so holy that he is so other than us, and we can't even approach God in his holiness. One of the examples we see, and there's so many examples of this in the Old Testament. One of them that's very, very memorable for our students and very powerful is when God reveals himself to Moses in a burning bush. He says, don't approach here, take off your sandals. This is holy ground. Because I'm here, because my presence is here in this bush, suddenly this place becomes sacred. With us and our sinfulness, we couldn't even approach God in his holiness. There's no way we couldn't do it. If it weren't for the blood of Christ and the salvation, the holiness that God, the righteousness that Jesus purchased on our behalf on the cross, and salvation through faith, we couldn't even enter into the courts of God, even with prayers or with praise, because of his holiness. That's how other and set apart he is, and perfect in all of his attributes. Finally, we're going to kind of begin to unpack with your students this idea that God alone is holy. There's no one else on this level. God's not the first in a long list. God is separate. There is no list. God is at the top of a category that includes only himself. Kind of look back at Exodus as you finish out this lesson on holiness and look at where God is described as majestic in his holiness. Who is like you, O God? It's a rhetorical question. There is no one like you. God alone is holy. So we're setting up this idea. We're laying the groundwork of God as separate, of other, high above us, so far above us in his holiness, in his perfection, in all of his attributes, and all of his ways. And again, as we begin to prepare for next week's lesson, where we're going to look at Jesus's role in purchasing holiness on our behalf and allowing us to experience the holiness of God through his sacrifice on the cross, that we can count on our behalf through faith. We'll begin to challenge your students to walk in holiness and to think what that looks like. But in this lesson, you're just kind of laying the groundwork. You're just doing the work to build that foundation of who God is, why he is holy, how he's holy, what holiness is, and the lesson will equip you with everything you need to do that. So I hope your lesson goes great. If I can help you, if our team can help you in any way, please let us know. We look forward to talking with you soon, and I'm praying for you, and I'll see you on the next Teacher Prep video. Take care.